right. Aloha, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the 2023 Hawaii Counseling. Oh, okay. We would like to remind everyone that today's session is being recorded and will be posted on the event website. Please keep all cameras off and microphones muted throughout the session if you would like to not be recorded. We would like to thank our live captioners who will be providing closed captioning for accessibility purposes. Since it is live, captioning may not accurately reflect what is being said. Captions will be corrected for session recordings. Recordings and resources will be posted to the site 3 to 4 weeks after today's presentation. If you have any questions for today's presenter, please add them to the chat box. I'm excited to introduce our speaker today, Dr. Nicole Cobb, who is an associate professor at Vanderbilt University, and she will share with us today on how to build a school-wide career and college program, utilizing a team approach to deepen your current career development work with students. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome Dr. Nicole Cobb.
Aloha, everyone. I'm so excited to be here with you today. The only thing that would really make this better is if I'm actually there with you, but I am coming to you from Vanderbilt University in Nashville, Tennessee. I am in my office, but you can see probably behind me, I have my lathe that students gave me the last time I was there. So really the highlight of my day, getting to be here with you. So today we're going to talk about how to build a school-wide career and college program. And I'm guessing that maybe some of you are currently doing some of this work. So we're just going to talk about if you are doing this, how do we deepen it and continuously improve to make it better? And if you're new to this work, what might it look like to get started? So I want to start us out by just having everyone close your eyes for a moment and imagine a school and your area complex in which every student graduates ready for college and career. In this system, all students want to succeed, and they have the tools and social emotional learning competencies they need to achieve for now and in the future. So take just a moment, close your eyes, imagine that. And then go ahead, open your eyes, and in the chat, type in, if your dream came true, what would be different in your school, for your students, for you, for your programming? Doesn't have to be a complete sentence, but type a few things in the chat for me. Students would have confidence in their direction. Yes. They would know what their direction is, maybe even. Anyone else? Students are provided with the time and space to explore individual interests and aptitudes. Yes, time is always at a premium, and that's one thing we are going to hit on today. Well, keep thinking, keep typing, and I will move on. So I want to kind of set the stage, the foundation with this, on why this work is so vital. So in a recent survey, 53% of students in the U.S. reported they do not feel ready for transitioning out of high school. And we know that part of this is related still to the pandemic, and re-entry into schools and life is hard. But here we are seeing that more than half of our students aren't. And then a different survey talked to CEOs, business and industry partners to say, what are you seeing in the workforce, our young workforce? And 98% of the CEOs responded reported a disconnect between what a role entails and what their employee can offer. And the interesting piece here is it wasn't that the academic skills or the technical skills, they weren't having issues with that, but it was more of what we call the soft skills. So things like communication, problem solving, being able to work on a team successfully, coming to work on time every day. Those were things that were real struggles for many of their young employees. And then the other piece was managing emotions and being productive. Young employees were having trouble with that. And I see, Vanessa, you put in students will be supported by their families regarding their goals. We have to have this be a partnership for it to be successful. So, as we think about that, how do we ensure this dream comes to fruition and isn't just something we talk about, but something that we actually concretely do in our schools? So I know, and I'm feeling it here too, the struggle is real. We have so many competing priorities in our schools. So I also would love for you to type in the chat, how many different initiatives are going in your school or in your complex this year that you know about? Just type in a number. When I've done this session in the past for other states and districts, I mean, sometimes the number is 20 plus different initiatives going on in one school. And when you have those competing priorities, it's hard to implement anything with fidelity. And it's also hard to just do it well and know what you are doing. So what is the key? How we can't maybe change all the competing priorities that come down on us from the top. So this key is double dipping. So here you see the wheel that has our employability skills with workplace skills. Now my eyes are, this screen is tiny on me. It's not as big, but the applied knowledge. Oh, thank you. Yay, Tatiana. And effective relationships. So we know those are the key skills to employability, or what sometimes we call soft skills. And then how do we get to those? We have to have applied academics, critical thinking, resource management. How do we use information? How do we analyze that information to inform our work? How do we communicate with our customers, our clients, and with each other on our team, with our bosses, our administrators? How do we think in a systems way, not just what's good for me, but what is good for the whole? Are we adept at using technology? And then those personal and interpersonal qualities. So I'm curious, is anybody already doing this work? I so wish I could see all of your faces today, but my guess is that many of you are teachers and school counselors or career and graduation coaches. And I bet that this is part of your work every day, but maybe you're not explicitly connecting all of these dots. So I also want to bring in here that a lot of those soft skills and even the things you've typed in the chat, a lot of people call soft skills SEL skills, social emotional learning skills. And so when we talk about career development, college advising, programs, we can't do that in isolation. We can't put that in a silo. Our career development work and our SEL work has to go hand in hand in order for our students to have lifelong success. And so here is what we know when we couple these things. We have increased student motivation and engagement. I don't know about you all, but the number one issue I'm seeing here in Nashville in our schools is that since the pandemic, there's just this lack of motivation. Kids don't seem excited to do the work. They're not engaged. We have a lot of school avoidance. So how do we make them want to come back and want to be part of our community? How do we really instill in them the grit and perseverance to do hard things over time? And if we do this, we will have increased attendance. We'll be teaching our students ways to manage their stress and their anxiety, and then also helping them with this task of setting short and long-term goals. So in our really busy schools that have all of these competing priorities, initiatives, programs, having cross-functional programs where we're doing this concept of double dipping, it's not just more efficient for us, but it's also more practical for students, and it makes what we're doing more relevant, which is really important. We know from the research that if students can't make those corrections in their brains, if they don't understand the why do I have to learn this, that they're less likely to retain it and apply it. So here's a strategy for effective double dipping. We need to leverage what is already in place. So I know from my past work in Hawaii that many of your high schools and middle schools are implementing an academy model or a career-themed small learning community. You may call it different things. But this is really important because one of the major goals of academies and career-themed pathways and programs is to explicitly connect the dots for the students. So why do you have to learn this in science? Because we're going to go out and apply it in a project-based learning activity or in an internship or one day for you on the job. Another piece that's really important as we're thinking about this work is we must be providing consistent opportunities for students to cultivate, practice, and reflect on these competencies that we're teaching them. And we want to do this in really culturally responsive ways. So, when we do this work, I can't just give you a checklist and say, here's all the things that you're going to do in the blueprint for your school, because only you know your students and where they are on this career development continuum and what they need in real time. And so how are you going to scope and sequence that for your school, for your complex, for your students? But often what we don't do is connect the dots for students. We're leveraging multiple programs. And I'm guilty of this myself. I might be really great at that direct instruction piece, but do I give my students time to apply the direct instruction when we think about social emotional learning competencies and career development competencies? Or am I just teaching it, assuming they're connecting the dots without really giving them a chance for practice? And then most importantly, that feedback of reflecting on how they're doing. Are they mastering these competencies? So one way that we do this is that as teachers and counselors, we have to think about our words, our language. We have to be explicit when we're talking in the classroom. So here's an example. When you set a goal today based on today's target, for us, let's make today's target setting up our scope and sequence for a career development program, and whatever your setting is, we will be working on self-management to achieve it. So hopefully, and I use self-management as the example here because it is one of Castle's 5 competencies, but you could interchange that if your school is using different language or vocabulary. And then to verbalize the reasoning behind having students interact and do group work, you could say, I'm pairing you up today so we can develop your communication, collaboration, and relationship skills. So instead of in science class or math class, just partnering them up to do an activity, we're being very explicit with our wording as to why, and connecting that to we're practicing these skills because these are the skills you're going to need when you leave us out in your job, in college, and those next steps of life. So I do want you to think about your specific role in the school. What are you currently doing in formal and informal ways to contribute to the student development of those indicators that we talked about before. And if you need to see those indicators real quick, I'll go back. So when we think about applying the academic skills, giving students time to critically think, to use information, to communicate, to use technology, to develop their interpersonal skills, what are you doing already in your setting, in your current role, that has them practicing that? So go ahead, type a few things in the chat. And as you're thinking about that, I want to share this continuum. So we know that career and social emotional development is most effective when students are provided a sequenced continuum of activities and experiences that address these career and post-secondary areas of awareness, exploration, and preparation. And some of this work is going to be very explicit, and some of it we just want to embed into the very fabric of our schools. So in our perfect world, you would be working as a complex and doing this vertical articulation piece. So what is the elementary school going to do? And how is first grade going to build on what kindergarten did? How is second grade going to build on what first grade did? And go all the way up through senior year of high school, mapping out what specifically are we going to do in this realm of career development. So from the research, we start in elementary school with career awareness. And we'll talk a little bit more in depth about this as we move forward. And then in middle school, career exploration. School, I hope they're getting some opportunity to take some career and technical education classes so they really get a feel for what's it like to experience some of these pathways and deepen their exploration, and then moving on into that preparation for their opportunities, future opportunities, and additional education. So we want to make sure that as we do this work, we're, not just going on Pinterest or TikTok to pull cool activities that look fun. We want data and standards and frameworks to guide our work. So, Teresa Sanchez shared this with me, and it really is nice that your Department of Education has already mapped out so much of this work. But here, I know a lot of schools are using the HA instead of the castle, or in addition to, we could definitely crosswalk those. But thinking about what you see in the green here is sort of your SEL competencies, those soft skills, those interpersonal skills we want students develop to just become better humans. And then on the right here, you see the standards and competencies mapped out for college readiness, career readiness, and community readiness. And of course, those documents are longer, and I am assuming that you all have access to these. If you don't, I'm sure we can connect you to Teresa and make sure you have this work. But we want to think about, as we're developing our program, how are we grounding it in the frameworks and standards of Hawaii? And the next piece that we need to make sure that we're educating ourselves on and using to inform our work is the Hawaii labor and workforce projections. So what you see on your screen here are your projections that go from 2020 to 2030. So I just pulled a few highlights. Employment in the state of Hawaii will grow by 15.3%. 699,000 jobs, adding over 92,000 positions, and there'll be at least 82,000 job openings each year during this forecasted period, with 9,000 of those being new jobs created by employers. So as we're kind of looking at that top list, and if you pulled this up a little more, look at the percentage of growth so you could see which fields are projected to grow and have either additional or new jobs, because ultimately we want to be advising our students in high skill, high wage, demand jobs. And we define high skill. That doesn't necessarily mean a 4-year degree. This could be an apprenticeship. This could be an industry certification. This could be an associate's degree. We want them certified in their area of expertise, so then they can earn that higher wage for their job. Now, everything I just said, this is a big project. This is big. And to do this work, it takes a village. No one school counselor, no one teacher can be tasked with having the sole responsibility of this. And, sometimes I work with principals, and when we're talking about career development, they were like, oh yeah, that's the counselor's job. No. This has to be a team job. It has to be all of us, every one of us in our school community. It is our responsibility to help students in elementary, middle, and high develop these skills and aspirations that are critical to preparing them for college, career, and really I should just add life. And we want this embedded in every class. So we'll keep talking about what it looks like. So as you're thinking about, well, who is the village? What is my team? Our best practice from the research when we think about building and implementing a career development program school-wide is first we need a planning team. And here on the left column, I've just brainstormed some of the key people that are typically on a planning team. This does not mean that it has to be these people. But let's talk a little bit about why I have some of these on here. So your school leaders and administrators, you've got to have them on board, because earlier we need the time. And if you don't have the time, how are you going to be able to do the work? So administrators can help protect the time, can help build in the time to the schedule. And then you do want your lead school counselors. So for many of your schools, they're very large and you're going to have 4 or 5 counselors. And we do want to hear everybody's input. For this planning team, typically your lead, your director would be on it. Registrars, they're key to this. They know what classes students are signing up for. They know what their interests are. They understand some of the barriers that can come into place with the PTP and those sort of things. You want to involve your complex area support leaders, and especially those for CTE as we're thinking about specifically career development. Your state office staff, they want to be involved. They're excited about this work, as well as your complex or district school counseling staff. And then we want teachers on here. Teachers have to be part of our planning team to help us figure out how are we going to do this work. And it's also very important as we're thinking about equity and being inclusive that we include our SPED and our transition specialists as we're planning. We do not want our SPED students to be an afterthought. We really want, as we sit down to plan this work, for it to be for all students, not just some students, not just the college-bound students, but all students. And then from here, we're going to have contributing members. So this planning team is going to come up with some initial thoughts. They're going to map out a skeleton of what it could look like, but they need feedback. So we're going to go to our contributing members, our content area teachers, our CTE teachers, the rest of the school counselors, curriculum or instructional coaches. We want the registrars weighing in, teacher mentors, coaches, our technology coordinators. We want them weighing in on the plan. What do you think about this? Is this realistic? Is this doable? Are you on board? We're wanting to garner buy-in. And then we also, after we get that and make our edits and our tweaks and further develop what this plan looks like. We need our whole village. We want our students and families, our industry and business partners, our post-secondary institutions, and then I know many of you have other really key community partners you're working with. We want them on board for the feedback. We want to ask questions like, if we're teaching these kind of lessons on employability skills and expectations, are we current and up to date with what the expectations in industry are? Things can change very fast, especially with technology. Are we staying current and relevant as we train our students? Okay, now we have this team. What does the team do? So it starts with what we call a SWOT analysis. And if you've never heard of a SWOT analysis, this is where we're mapping out. I like to take a big piece of chart paper and draw a big T on it. And we have a box for our strengths as a school through the lens of what we're implementing around a career development continuum, what our weaknesses are, where do we have opportunities for school moving to an academy or a pathway model? Oh, there's endless opportunities and places to do this work. And then we also want to think about what are the threats to doing this work. And an example of threats would be those competing priorities that we talked about. You can have, and I bet some of you might be feeling this right now, is implementation fatigue. Don't ask me to do one new program. So we really want to think about where is our school now? What is working well? What's not? And then how do we use that so that our planning team can move forward? If you're brand new to this work and if your school doesn't have a full career development, a school-wide career development program in place, your team's going to have to meet somewhat regularly in the beginning to get this together. And although it looks different, the teams look different at every school. I just showed you the slide that gave you some ideas. But I also want you to think, could you leverage the work of a current team? So we don't necessarily have to create a brand new team if we have one in place with the right people on it. But only you'll know if you have that at your school. So I'll give you an example. A lot of my work in Hawaii is with academy and pathway schools. So if you already had that and your academy team is already meeting weekly and involved in that work, they can then take on this work. It doesn't necessarily have to be a totally different team. I know no one wants one more committee to be on. And then next, this group needs to have an open and honest discussion around all that students need to know and be able to do for their future success. So we want to come to agreement on it as a team. What are the mindsets and behaviors your students need to be successful? And what that looks like at Castle High School might be different than what that looks like at Wapahu High School. There might be some things that are the same, but there might be others that are different. Or maybe your language and vocabulary, what you call it or what you're going to use to name it might be different. But we have to come to consensus on what is it that we're teaching. If we're saying we're going into career exploration and development, what are the employability skills? What are the professional skills? What are the SEL competencies that you have to apply in the workplace in college? What are those? And then using this knowledge, the group's going to create their list of objectives and think about how are we going to move this forward. So ongoing continuous process. So we don't want any of our work, and especially this work, to just be compliance-based, where we're putting a pretty plan on paper and then it's going on the shelf and it's not something we're going to revisit or think about, did that work? Did that not work? What do we need to tweak for the next time? So we continuously want to support students with their self-knowledge, exploration, decision-making, and then taking action. None of this matters if we don't have students ready to make a decision. So let's explore that just a little more. So self-knowledge. Starting as early as elementary school, we want students to start to know who they are. All of us bring many identities to the room. What are those, and how do they intersect, and how do they impact how I show up in this world, how I show up at school, how I show up at work, how I show up with my friends? So thinking about, who am I? What do I like? And just as important, what do I dislike? What am I good at? And then what are my core values? What's really important to me? What would I put my life on the line for? And of course, as we do this work, we want to consider the developmental and chronological age of our students, and always knowing these can change over time. If you start this piece of self-knowledge in elementary school, which I hope you do, know that as students grow and mature into middle and high school, some of these things will shift. And that's okay. And it's why it's really important for this self-knowledge work that it is scope and sequence, but we don't just do it once and then take it off the list. Next comes career awareness. Again, this begins in kindergarten. So often I'm in schools where they think career awareness doesn't really begin until high school. And in our continuum, we want this to begin in kindergarten, with the purpose being activities for elementary students to help them understand the world around them. We want to do this through school counselors and teachers partnering with career awareness lessons. And I want us to be really mindful that we don't just bring in careers to these conversations that are just the commonplace. Like, we don't want to just do firemen, police officers, teachers. We really want to think about what are probably some occupations students have never heard of before, so we can increase their knowledge and also maybe their excitement about a field that they didn't know existed. And part of this work is giving students autonomy. We want them to start taking some control and ownership over their own learning. So how can we give elementary students time and assignments and projects where they start to do their own career research, and then they practice and present that research to their class, to their peers? We also want to think about bringing in guest speakers from the community. I know sometimes that can be hard to do, but as much as possible and early on, we want our kiddos to see people that, other than us, that are doing, jobs that they love and they want to do, and that are high skill, high wage, and in demand. And then we also want to early on talk about professional skills, and that can even look like how we're treating each other in the classroom. What does respect look like in our classroom? What does teamwork look like? And I did note on here, you have a lot of this in your standards and your GLOs. So, I always want to caution this. I don't want this to feel like something brand new. One more thing. So many of these competencies are already embedded in your current standards, and I hope in your current work. And then moving on to middle school, you have career exploration. This is where we really want students to go deeper than what they got to do in elementary school. So we want them to take career interest inventories, such as the RISAC. Maybe some of you use Naviance, maybe some of you use ONET. There's many free and different career interest inventories out there, but we want students to have some data on what they're interested in. And then we want to couple that with what they're good at. So, I can really want to be a professional basketball player. I know you all can't see me here, but I'm only 5 feet tall. A basketball playing is not anywhere in my future. Not now, it wasn't ever. So I have to think about what's realistic, what am I good at, and what am I interested in? Where do those things intersect? And students need a lot of support and opportunities to explore that in order to be able to make those decisions. So often, if your school has an advisory period, this is really an ideal space to do some of this work. Now, one of the pitfalls that I often see with career interest inventories is that we're often really good at administering them. And then where we fall a little short is in what comes after. We give them the results back, but are we doing a sequence of lessons on, well, what do I do with this data? How does it inform the classes that I'm picking in middle and high school? How does it inform maybe some hobbies or ways that I can explore, maybe a job that I would do? Another idea to help students in the middle school age is connecting students to career mentors in your community, thinking about how you could plan industry-specific field trips based on their interest inventory data. And then could your school think about doing some PBL, some project-based learning things? Maybe it's just one a semester or one a year to start, but how could you create some of those that have a career-related theme? And in middle school, do they align if you're in a complex with an academy or pathway high school? Are you doing that work to align with the course offerings and the pathway offerings at your feeder high school? And then finally, when they get into high school, we want teachers and counselors charged with preparing students to begin that transition to either post-secondary training and or the workforce. So how, again, are we building on what we did in middle school, helping students identify their skills, their talents? I believe it's really important to promote that CTE coursework so they well-rounded education. They have a safe, low-stakes environment to explore some careers. And, I often hear from teachers or counselors or even families, that when you have to do a PTP or pick an academy when you're in 8th or 9th grade, how do we expect a 14, 15-year-old to make these big decisions? Well, we're not asking anyone to make a permanent decision. Really, our language should be about what career are you interested in exploring more or deeper? And maybe from that, you decide, you know what, this is not for me. You might think if your kiddos are watching Grey's Anatomy, they might think, yes, I want to work in an ER, in a trauma center. And then, they take biology, chemistry, and they realize that dissecting a frog or seeing blood turns their stomach upside down. But it takes those real life experiences for a student to make the connection of, maybe this isn't a fit for me. Maybe this isn't what I like and I want to do. And so we want to really be intentional with our work of developing their skills, their interests, their strengths, their passions, and helping them figure out, how does this align? How do these connect? And then how do we embed that curricula into the classes? So I wanted to show you here, this is a rubric from one school called Career Ready Practice. And this, all the teachers in the grade level use this to actually give students scores in addition to their grades in their classes. They talk about how they're doing in each of these career ready areas. So, working positively, working ethically, scoring them on the rubric, having discussions with students on here's where you're doing well with these career development, workplace, career ready skills. Here are places where I want to see some growth, where I want you to practice. I want you to push yourself, push your edges as we do what we're already doing, as we do our assignments and our projects in our current classes. And we're doing all this so then we can help students get to the decision-making stage, which can be really challenging. But as they're progressing in, they're going to have to start making some decisions. And, we say that knowledge is power. So our job as teachers, as school counselors, is to make sure our students and families have as much knowledge, as much data as they can in this career development area so they can make really good informed decisions on what next steps might look like for them. And when I say next steps, I'm talking about their program of study, the courses they're picking from 10th grade to 11th grade to 12th grade. Are they going to take AP and honors classes? Are they going to go for a national industry certification while they're in high school? We want to be having these conversations and then to this phase of action, of setting goals. It's really important for our students that we are teaching them what SMART goals are, something that is specific, that's measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-based. And so an example I like to give is, if I say I want to run a marathon tomorrow, and I haven't, run a mile yet, I'm going to have to set some short and long-term goals to get to the place where I can run a marathon. So maybe my short-term goals is by Saturday, April 2nd, I will have gone for a walk of at least 1 mile. And, thinking that's specific, that's measurable, I'm pretty sure I can do it, and I have a date. So we want to help our students start to make some of these short and long-term SMART goals around their career and their post-secondary, what they want to do. And we'll talk in a moment a little bit about the PTP, but we really want to have a career goal embedded into that PTP that we're talking about regularly. So that leads me to what is high impact advising and the PTP that I know Hawaii uses. So most states have something like the PTP. They don't always call it that, but in many places this is just compliance driven. It's not meaningful. It's something that might even be done on the computer. Maybe kids have a task list that they have to do in Naviance or another program, but it's not really a curriculum. It's not something that's concrete, that is scope and sequence that's built. And so we want to think about how do we move from a compliance mindset to a meaningful process, because you have a nice foundation with the PDP and your career development work. Make it something really meaningful for students. So we want to think about this as a multi-year process that intentionally guides your students and families in this career and academic intersection that informs post-secondary options. And I'm very intentionally using the word post-secondary here because what we do know from the research is that all students need some training post-high school to be able to be hired in a high-skill, high-wage, in-demand job, but that does not mean a degree. That might be an apprenticeship, a certification, a journeyman's license, something like that. So when we say high-impact advising, we need that to be part of our village owning it. So it needs to not just be the counselor sitting down, having a one-on-one once a year with the student to get their course request and check off part of this box. We need this to be happening in homeroom. We need this embedded in their core content classes, in their elective classes, so that students really start to connect the dots to how what I'm doing in each of my classes impacts the conversations I'm having with my counselor, that then impacts whatever my next steps are, whether it's transitioning to the next grade or out of the school or on to post-secondary or work. And we want to make sure students have really multiple and varied ways to build this awareness, explore, experience throughout the whole continuum. And we also, again, I'll say it so many times, we want this to be data driven. So we want to be having our students lead these conversations with us. How are you doing in your classes? Good is not the answer. I want to hear what's your grade in English, what's your grade in math. I also want to hear, where can you grow? Tell me what growth in your math class would look like for you this year. And I want them to start articulating with these data chats how they can grow. Even if you have a student with all A's, it's going to be your valedictorian. I want to know, how are they going to push themselves to grow? So really thinking about these high impact conversations, not just 5 minutes in and out so you can check the boxes on your PTP. So what I've included here, and I'm happy to share more documents with anyone that is interested, but what a sample scope and sequence would look like, and then what your evidence. So on the left-hand side, you have grades 5 and 4, and then I put grade 10 here, but you have what certain activities could look like, and then you have, well, how will we know if they got it? What would the evidence or the artifact look like? So I do have these for multiple grades and happy to share more if anyone wants it. And one thing I hear all the time is like, Nicole, when are we going to do this work? We're already short on time. Teachers in our state of like high stakes testing and accountability, we don't have class time to give up for this. So I really advocate for a robust, I say robust, advisory period. And even if this is work you can only explicitly do 2 or 3 days a week, you might have to change a bell schedule, but advisory is a really nice place to embed a lot of this work. Now, I know some of you have advisory. So a few words of caution. This can't be like, oh, you mean free time? You mean club time? You mean make up the test? No, we want it to be where you're implementing programming. And so this goes back to our planning and implementation team, the contributing members and the planning team, but we need to build short, doable lessons. So I'm going to go back to where we were earlier in our session. What is it? What are those skills, those mindsets, behaviors that you want your students to know and be able to do? Let's chart those out. Okay, how are we going to teach self-management? How are we going to teach grit? How are we going to teach those things? And then we're going to have a short lesson. And when I say advisory, I'm talking some of these are 20 to 25 minutes. This is not a 55-minute period. We've got to go in, hit a skill really quickly, directly, give them a little time for practice, out. But the key to making it work is that it's consistent, that we're doing it 2 days a week throughout the whole year. So one thing I like to do with schools that decide they do want to embark on this is the first thing we do is say, okay, if advisory is 2 times a week where we could actually commit to delivering content, how many of those do you have throughout the year that's realistic? Because you've got what? If you're in a high school, you've got Spirit Week, you've got testing, then you're going to maybe be out of school for certain things. So let's get to like really on paper quantitatively, how many lessons do we have to work with? Most schools We're at 25 to 30 for the whole year and on a good day. So we're not talking about having to build, 100 something lessons. It's really small and manageable. And I want to reiterate, we don't need to buy anything. This is not, spending expensive things from, a publishing company or buying curriculum. These are all things that are actually better if they're built in-house. And that, again, we're always going back to addressing those skills, mindsets, behaviors, competencies that your team has decided it's important for your skills, your students to build on, to know, to further develop. And so as we start to wrap up, as educators, it is our job to ensure all students in Hawaii have the opportunity to prepare for a variety of careers and have the skills necessary to be successful either after leaving our tier or graduating from high school. I love it because if I go to a middle school and we talk about behaviors of students, they say, well, if the elementary teachers had done their job. And then I go to high schools and they say, well, if those middle teachers had done our job. And now that I'm teaching in college, sometimes I find myself saying, oh, well, if those high school teachers had just done it, this would be easier. So, I really want us to change our mindset that our students aren't our responsibility just the year we have them. They are our responsibility throughout the full continuum of their education. And so if our ultimate dream comes true, our students will leave us understanding how their unique strengths and interests align to a wide variety of future opportunities. And we will be helping them preparing and maintaining a personal plan for their goal attainment that provides for flexibility based on their experiences as they continue throughout their school, throughout life. Will effectively navigate both the world of higher education and employment to transition them into adulthood, and we'll be working with them so they possess that confidence. I forget who wrote in the chat earlier, but I think, Susan, you said you wanted students to have that confidence and knowledge, skills, and character in relation to their personal and career goals. And then finally, as educators, we'll be committed to providing developmentally appropriate opportunities for students to learn and demonstrate this knowledge. We'll be guiding students through their career and planning process. We'll be helping master those standards and competencies in their coursework, as well as with these professional skills we'll talked about. We're going to encourage active engagement in extracurricular activities so they can explore outside of just their content classroom. We're going to collaborate with partners in our community and industry and business. And we're going to align our curriculum to careers and post-secondary opportunities. And so when we do this together, we can help students engage in meaningful programs of study that align to their future career goals and ensure that our students are successful and productive Hawaii citizens. So I'm going to open it up for questions now. If anybody has any, please feel free to pop them in the chat. And I think you all have my email, but if not, I will pop that in the chat. So if any of you have further questions or want additional resources, I'm happy to be a support for you and to share what I have. But I'll close as we wait and see if we have questions with just thanking you all for the very hard work you do with students each and every day. Oh, Kathy, yay, one of my favorite people is here. Thanks for the message. It's really the highlight getting to support you in your complex. Yeah, I'll send you the scope and sequence document.
All right. Thank you so much, Nicole. I did have a question for you. So, if there is a complex that is interested in getting started to kind of build this continuum, what is a suggestion on how they can get this going or where they should start? I know you talked about building a team. Um, any just
Yeah.
pointers on kind of how to get this going and what that would look like?
Yeah, so I think, if you need to start small, just a few people that you have in your building that are excited about this, and just have the conversation around what are we already doing and then how might we build on that, because I've not been in a school yet that isn't doing some of this work. Now sometimes it takes a little bit of digging to go, oh yeah, you do this is this work. But let's just start the conversation of what's going well, what's in place, and then what can we build on, so it doesn't feel like one more brand new thing on an already full plate.
That is so good. I like that. And I think our schools will also appreciate that too. So thank you so much, Nicole. It's been
Yes,
so awesome to hear just the work that you're doing and how you're just suggesting these strategies to help our schools really dive into this together and look at this continuum from elementary, middle school, and high school. So thank you so much.
yes.
Thank you everyone for joining us today. Oh, sorry. Go ahead,
No,
Nicole.
I was just going to say, I hope you enjoy the rest of your convening, um, and don't hesitate to reach out if I can help.
Thanks, Nicole. Okay, everyone. So I put the survey in the chat. Go ahead. We would love your feedback. Thank you for joining us today. Enjoy the rest of your day. We hope this time was very valuable for you all. And yeah, everybody take care. This closes our convening and our session. So yeah, everybody, we will see you guys later and take care. All right. Thank you. Mahalo.
All right. Thank you so much.